Dr. Elena Vasquez stared at the cracked ceiling of her cramped apartment, watching water stains spread like bruises across the yellowed plaster. The medical license that once hung proudly on her wall now lay buried in a drawer, revoked 3 years ago after she dared to treat wounded soldiers from both sides of the Terran Civil War. The Galactic Medical Council had branded her a traitor, stripping away everything she'd worked for. The communication device on her rickety table buzzed with an incoming transmission. Elena almost ignored it. Creditors had been hounding her for months. But the signal carried an encryption signature she hadn't seen in years. With trembling fingers, she activated the hologram. A tall, graceful figure materialized before her. The Etherian ambassador's crystalline features reflected the dim light of Elena's apartment, like fractured starlight. These beings rarely spoke to humans directly, considering them crude and violent. Dr. Vasquez, the ambassador's voice chimed like distant bells. "We require your services." Elena laughed bitterly. "My services? I'm nobody now. Find another doctor." "There is no other." The ambassador's expression remained serene, but urgency crept into their tone. "Our records indicate you treated a Catherian warrior during the Proxima Station incident 15 years ago. You are the only human who has successfully operated on their physiology." The memory hit Elena like a physical blow. Zarek, a massive wolf-like alien bleeding out in a bombed medical bay. His species was legendary for their aggression and isolation. Most doctors would have let him die rather than risk treating something so dangerous. But Elena had seen the intelligence in his golden eyes, the silent plea for help. "That was different," Elena said. "Emergency conditions. I barely knew what I was doing. Nevertheless, you succeeded where others would have failed." The ambassador leaned forward. "Admiral Zarek of the Catherian Deep Fleet has fallen into what your kind might call severe depression. He has isolated himself on the dead world of Corvash Prime and refuses all contact. His condition threatens not just his life, but the stability of the entire galactic frontier." Elena frowned. Catherians were apex predators, evolved on a harsh world where only the strongest survived. They didn't get depressed. They got angry and conquered things. Without Admiral Zarek's fleet protecting the outer rim, the void wraiths grow bolder, the ambassador continued. 3 colonies have already gone dark. The Galactic Council estimates we have perhaps 6 months before they launch a full invasion. The weight of those words settled over Elena like a shroud. The void wraiths were nightmares made manifest. Energy beings that consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing but empty husks drifting in space. Only the Catherian fleet's constant patrols kept them contained in the dark spaces between galaxies. "Why me?" Elena asked. "Surely there are Catherian medics. Admiral Zarek has sealed his fortress world. No ship may approach within 10 light minutes without being destroyed except—" The ambassador paused dramatically. "Ships bearing the genetic signature of Dr. Elena Vasquez. It appears he remembers you quite well." Elena stared at the hologram, her mind racing. This was insane. She was a washed-up human medic with a drinking problem and mounting debts. What could she possibly do for a creature that could tear apart starships with his bare claws? "The Council offers full restoration of your medical license," the ambassador added. "A new ship, complete medical facilities, and enough credits to start fresh anywhere in the galaxy. And if I refuse, then we all die when the void wraiths arrive." Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of billions of lives pressing down on her shoulders. She thought of Zarek's eyes that day on Proxima Station, not the golden orbs of a predator, but those of a person in pain. Someone who had trusted her when no one else would. "When do I leave?" she asked quietly. The ambassador's form began to fade. "Your ship awaits at Docking Bay 7, and Dr. Vasquez, time is not our ally. Whatever has broken Admiral Zarek runs deeper than simple melancholy. Our psychic analysts detect an overwhelming sense of guilt and self-hatred emanating from Corvash Prime. Be very careful. A Catherian consumed by such emotions is more dangerous than a dozen void wraiths." The hologram vanished, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts and the sudden realization that she was about to travel across the galaxy to perform therapy on a depressed alien war machine. She reached for the bottle of synth whiskey on her counter, then stopped. If she was going to do this impossible thing, she needed to be sober. Instead, she pulled out her old medical bag and began checking her supplies. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, an old patient was waiting for her, and whether she was ready or not, Elena Vasquez was going back to work. The medical frigate Asclepius cut through hyperspace like a silver needle threading cosmic fabric. Elena stood in the observation deck, watching swirling patterns of impossible colors stream past the reinforced windows. 3 days into the journey to Corvash Prime, and she still couldn't believe she'd agreed to this madness. The ship was a marvel of Etherean engineering. Sterile white corridors lined with the most advanced medical equipment in the galaxy. Autosurgeons that could operate at the molecular level, healing tanks filled with regenerative biogel, and diagnostic scanners that could map every neuron in a living brain. All for one patient who might kill her the moment she set foot on his world. Dr. Kevis, the ship's AI, materialized beside her as a shimmering blue hologram. Unlike the cold mechanical AIs humans typically built, Kevis possessed an almost childlike curiosity about everything around him. Dr. Vasquez, I have completed my analysis of Admiral Zarek's psychological profile, Kevis announced, his form flickering with excitement. The data is disturbing. Elena turned from the window. Show me. A 3-dimensional map appeared in the air between them, showing the galactic rim where Zarek's fleet had patrolled for the past decade. Red markers indicated void wraith incursions, while blue dots marked successful defensive actions. Admiral Zarek has personally led over 300 battles against the void wraiths, Kevis explained. His tactical genius has saved countless worlds. But 6 months ago, something changed. The map zoomed in on a small system near the galactic edge. The Thylos system. 3 inhabited worlds, approximately 2 billion souls. The void wraiths launched a massive assault, breaking through the defensive perimeter while Admiral Zarak was responding to a distress call from the opposite end of his patrol route. Elena watched the simulation play out. Zarek's flagship, the Bloodfang, had raced back toward Thylos at maximum speed, but arrived hours too late. The 3 worlds hung in space like burned cinders, their populations consumed, their life force absorbed by the energy beings. 2 billion people, Elena whispered. The Admiral's after-action report contained a single line. Kevis continued. Command failure resulted in total loss of civilian population. Request immediate court-martial. Did he get one? The Catherian High Command refused. They declared the Admiral a hero for saving 17 other systems that same month, but Admiral Zarek disagreed. The holographic display showed the last known images of Zarek's fleet. Massive predatory ships shaped like enormous wolves, their hulls scarred from countless battles. They had simply vanished into hyperspace one day, heading for the dead world of Corvash Prime. Catherians don't process guilt the way humans do, Ellen mused. Their society is built on strength, dominance, survival of the fittest. Failure means weakness, and weakness means death. Precisely. In Admiral Zarek's mind, those 2 billion deaths mark him as unworthy to lead. He has effectively sentenced himself to exile until death claims him. Elena studied the tactical readouts, her medical training automatically analyzing patterns. But he's still protecting his territory. Ships trying to approach Corvash Prime get destroyed, right? Correct. His defensive systems remain fully operational. It suggests his survival instincts haven't been completely overwhelmed by his psychological trauma. The observation deck's door hissed open, and Captain Torres entered. The grizzled spacer had been assigned as Elena's pilot, one of the few humans who'd actually served alongside Catherian forces during the border wars. Doc, we're dropping out of hyperspace in 6 hours, Torres announced. You might want to see what we're flying into. He activated the main viewer, showing long-range scans of the Corvash system. At its heart sat a brown dwarf star, too small to truly ignite but still radiating, enough heat to warm the single world orbiting. Close to its surface, Corvash Prime had once been a Catherian military academy, a harsh world where young warriors learned to hunt and fight. Now it appeared completely lifeless. Massive weapon platforms orbited the planet like metallic moons, their targeting arrays tracking everything within light minutes of the system. Those defense platforms could vaporize a battlecruiser before it knew what hit it, Torres explained. Whatever's got Admiral Zarek spooked, he's not taking any chances. Elena studied the scans more carefully. There, in the northern continent, those structures are too regular to be natural. Kevis enhanced the image, revealing a massive fortress built into the side of a mountain. The architecture was unmistakably Catherian, all sharp angles and aggressive lines designed to intimidate as much as defend. The Bloodfang is docked at the main facility, Kevis reported. Power signatures indicate minimal crew aboard, Perhaps 30 individuals out of a normal complement of 800? He dismissed his fleet, Elena realized. Sent them away so they wouldn't have to watch him die slowly. Classic Catherian honor code, Torres agreed grimly. A disgraced leader suffers alone. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's climate controls. She was flying into the den of an apex predator who had already decided he deserved to die. One wrong word, one misunderstood gesture, and those legendary claws could end her before she could blink. Dr. Vasquez, Kevis said quietly. May I ask why you agreed to this mission? Your files suggest you could have lived comfortably in exile. Elena thought about that for a long moment, watching the brown dwarf's dim light flicker through the observation windows. 15 years ago, I saw something in Zarek's eyes that most people miss. Catherians aren't just predators, they're protectors. Their aggression comes from a deep need to shield others from harm. When that fails, she trailed off, remembering the weight of Zarek's massive form on her operating table, the way he'd gripped her hand with surprising gentleness when she'd told him he would live. When that fails, they don't just break, she continued. They shatter completely. And right now, the only thing standing between civilization and the void wraiths is a shattered wolf who's forgotten why he fights. The ship shuddered slightly as it began its final approach to Corvash Prime. Somewhere ahead, in a fortress on a dead world, her most challenging patient was waiting. The medical frigate Asclepius cut through hyperspace like a silver needle, threading cosmic fabric. Elena stood in the observation deck, watching swirling patterns of impossible colors stream past the reinforced windows. 3 days into the journey to Corvash Prime, and she still couldn't believe she'd agreed to this madness. The ship was a marvel of Etherian engineering, sterile white corridors lined with the most advanced medical equipment in the galaxy. Autosurgeons that could operate at the molecular level, healing tanks filled with regenerative biogel, and diagnostic scanners that could map every neuron in a living brain, all for one patient who might kill her the moment she set foot on his world. Dr. Kevis, the ship's AI, materialized beside her as a shimmering blue hologram. Unlike the cold mechanical AIs humans typically built, Kevis possessed an almost childlike curiosity about everything around him. Dr. Vasquez, I have completed my analysis of Admiral Zarek's psychological profile, Kevis announced, his form flickering with excitement. The data is disturbing. Elena turned from the window. Show me. A 3-dimensional map appeared in the air between them, showing the galactic rim where Zarek's fleet had patrolled for the past decade. Red markers indicated void wraith incursions, while blue dots marked successful defensive actions. Admiral Zarek has personally led over 300 battles against the void wraiths, Kevis explained. His tactical genius has saved countless worlds. But 6 months ago, something changed. The map zoomed in on a small system near the galactic edge. The Thylos system, 3 inhabited worlds, approximately 2 billion souls. The void wraiths launched a massive assault, breaking through the defensive perimeter while Admiral Zarek was responding to a distress call from the opposite end of his patrol route. Elena watched the simulation play out. Zarek's flagship, the Bloodfang, had raced back toward Thylos at maximum speed but arrived hours too late. The 3 worlds hung in space like burned cinders, their populations consumed, their life force absorbed by the energy beings. 2 billion people, Elena whispered. The Admiral's after-action report contained a single line, Kevis continued. Command failure resulted in total loss of civilian population. Request immediate court-martial. Did he get one? The Catherian High Command refused. They declared the Admiral a hero for saving 17 other systems that same month. But Admiral Zarek disagreed. The holographic display showed the last known images of Zarek's fleet, massive predatory ships shaped like enormous wolves, their hulls scarred from countless battles. They had simply vanished into hyperspace one day, heading for the dead world of Corvash Prime. Catherians don't process guilt the way humans do, Elena mused. Their society is built on strength, dominance, survival of the fittest. Failure means weakness, and weakness means death. Precisely. In Admiral Zarek's mind, those 2 billion deaths mark him as unworthy to lead. He has effectively sentenced himself to exile until death claims him. Elena studied the tactical readouts, her medical training automatically analyzing patterns. But he's still protecting his territory. Ships trying to approach Corvash Prime get destroyed, right? Correct. His defensive systems remain fully operational. It suggests his survival instincts haven't been completely overwhelmed by his psychological trauma. The observation deck's door hissed open, and Captain Torres entered. The grizzled spacer had been assigned as Elena's pilot, one of the few humans who'd actually served alongside Catherian forces during the border wars. "Doc, we're dropping out of hyperspace in 6 hours," Torres announced. "You might want to see what we're flying into." He activated the main viewer, showing long-range scans of the Corvash system. At its heart sat a brown dwarf star, too small to truly ignite but still radiating, enough heat to warm the single world orbiting, close to its surface. Corvash Prime had once been a Catherian military academy, a harsh world where young warriors learned to hunt and fight. Now it appeared completely lifeless. Massive weapon platforms orbited the planet like metallic moons, their targeting arrays tracking everything within light minutes of the system. Those defense platforms could vaporize a battlecruiser before it knew what hit it, Torres explained. "Whatever's got Admiral Zarek spooked, he's not taking any chances." Elena studied the scans more carefully. There, in the northern continent, those structures are too regular to be natural. Kevis enhanced the image, revealing a massive fortress built into the side of a mountain. The architecture was unmistakably Catherian, all sharp angles and aggressive lines designed to intimidate as much as defend. "The Bloodfang is docked at the main facility," Kevis reported. "Power signatures indicate minimal crew aboard, perhaps 30 individuals out of a normal complement of 800. He dismissed his fleet, Elena realized. Sent them away so they wouldn't have to watch him die slowly. Classic Catherian honor code, Torres agreed grimly. A disgraced leader suffers alone. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's climate controls. She was flying into the den of an apex predator, who had already decided he deserved to die. One wrong word, one misunderstood gesture, and those legendary claws could end her before she could blink. "Dr. Vasquez," Kevis said quietly, "may I ask why you agreed to this mission? Your files suggest you could have lived comfortably in exile." Elena thought about that for a long moment, watching the brown dwarf's dim light flicker through the observation windows. 15 years ago, I saw something in Zarek's eyes that most people miss. Catherians aren't just predators, they're protectors. Their aggression comes from a deep need to shield others from harm. When that fails... She trailed off, remembering the weight of Zarek's massive form on her operating table, the way he'd gripped her hand with surprising gentleness when she'd told him he would live. "When that fails, they don't just break," she continued. "They shatter completely. And right now, the only thing standing between civilization and the void race is a shattered wolf who's forgotten why he fights." The ship shuddered slightly as it began its final approach to Corvash Prime. Somewhere ahead, in a fortress on a dead world, her most challenging patient was waiting. The tactical center of Zarek's fortress was a cathedral of war. Holographic displays covered every surface, showing real-time data from across the galactic rim. Star charts pulsed with threat assessments, fleet positions, and civilian evacuation routes. At the room's center stood a massive command table, where three-dimensional battle scenarios played out in miniature. Elena watched Zarek move through this space like a ghost haunting his former life. His claws traced paths through the air above the holograms, unconsciously plotting defensive strategies even as his voice carried the weight of absolute despair. "Here," he said, gesturing to a small cluster of stars near the galactic edge. "The Thylos system. 3 worlds, Thylos Prime with its floating cities, Thylos Beta with its crystal gardens, and Little Thylos Gamma, where the colonists had just finished terraforming their first continent." The holographic display zoomed in, showing the doomed system in perfect detail. Elena could see orbital habitats, shipping lanes, even the positions of civilian transports caught in their regular flight patterns. "Show me the day it happened," Elena said. Zarek's ears flattened, but he complied. The display shifted to tactical mode, showing fleet positions 6 months ago. Blue markers indicated Catherian forces while red swarms represented the void wraiths. "I had divided my fleet to cover 17 systems simultaneously," Zarek explained, his voice becoming clinical and detached. "Standard defensive posture for this sector. Early warning sensors detected a massive void wraith buildup here." He pointed to empty space beyond the galactic rim. Intelligence suggested they were preparing for a 3-pronged assault. The simulation began to play. Elena watched as Zarak's forces spread out in a complex defensive formation, each ship positioned to respond to multiple potential threats. It was brilliant tactical planning, the kind that had made him legendary throughout Catherian space. The first distress call came from the Helix Nebula, Zarak continued. 17 light-years from Thylos, a massive void wraith force had broken through our picket lines and was heading straight for the Centauri colonies. 40 billion souls. Elena nodded, following the logic. You had to respond. I took 2/3 of my fleet and raced to intercept. The attack on Centauri was devastating. Wave after wave of void wraiths, unlike anything we had encountered before. They had evolved new feeding methods, new ways to drain life energy from their victims. The holographic battle played out in fast forward. Elena could see the Catherian ships engaging the energy beings in desperate combat. Ships vanished in flashes of dark light, consumed by the very entities they fought. But slowly, gradually, Zarak's forces began to push the invaders back. We won, Zarak said simply. 40 billion people lived because of that battle. But while we fought, the display shifted back to the Thylos system. Elena watched in horror as a different swarm of void wraiths materialized near the three worlds. These beings moved with purpose and intelligence, striking simultaneously at all major population centers. It was a feint, Elena realized. The attack on Centauri was meant to draw you away. Yes, and I fell for it completely. Zarak's claws scored deep grooves in the command table. By the time I received the distress calls from Thylos, it was already too late. The journey back took 6 hours at maximum hyperspace velocity. When we arrived, the simulation showed the aftermath. 3 dead worlds orbiting a star that somehow seemed dimmer than before. No life signs, no energy readings, nothing but empty husks where vibrant civilizations had thrived just hours earlier. 2 billion souls, Zarak whispered. Families, children, artists, scientists, farmers who had never seen a day of war in their lives. All of them screaming for help while I chased shadows in the Helix Nebula. Elena studied the tactical display, her mind working through the implications. Admiral, you said the void wraiths had evolved new capabilities. What if this wasn't just about drawing your fleet away? What if they specifically needed you gone to complete whatever they were doing at Thylos? Zarak's golden eyes focused on her with predatory intensity. Explain. Void wraiths feed on life energy, but they've never been this coordinated before. This level of strategic thinking, the ability to conduct a complex deception operation, that's not how they've operated in the past. Elena moved closer to the display, highlighting the attack patterns. Look at this. They didn't just consume the populations of these worlds. They did something else, something that required your fleet to be elsewhere. The sensor readings from that day are unusual, Zarak admitted reluctantly. We detected massive energy spikes just before the populations died, but our science teams concluded it was simply an artifact of the feeding process, or it was something else entirely, something they needed to do without the most brilliant tactical mind in the galaxy watching. For the first time since Elena's arrival, something flickered in Zarak's eyes that wasn't despair. Curiosity, perhaps, or the faintest spark of his old analytical nature. You think I was not simply outmaneuvered? He said slowly. You think I was deliberately neutralized? I think you've been punishing yourself for losing a game where the rules were never explained to you. Elena pulled up the fleet deployment data from that day. Show me every engagement your forces had with void wraiths in the months leading up to Thylos. Zarak hesitated, then began calling up battle reports. As the data accumulated, a pattern began to emerge. The void wraiths had been probing specific sectors, testing response times, analyzing Catherian tactical doctrine with increasing sophistication. They were studying you, Elena breathed, learning your methods, your priorities, your psychological profile. The attack on Thylos wasn't random, it was designed specifically to exploit your greatest strength. My strength? Your inability to abandon people in need. They knew that if they threatened 40 billion souls, you would respond with everything you had. You're not just a tactical genius, Admiral. You're predictably noble, and they used that nobility against you. Zarak stood motionless for a long moment, processing this new interpretation of events that had defined his exile. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a note of something Elena hadn't heard before. Uncertainty. If what you suggest is true, then the attack on Thylos was not a failure of command judgment. It was an elaborate trap designed by an intelligence far more sophisticated than we assumed. Which raises a terrifying question, Elena added. If the Void Wraiths are that smart, what were they really doing at Thylos while you were away? And why haven't they pressed their advantage in the 6 months since? The fortress around them suddenly felt less like a monument to failure, and more like the command center of a war that was far from over. And somewhere in the tactical displays, Elena suspected, lay clues to a threat that made their previous understanding of the Void Wraiths look like children's drawings of monsters under the bed. Elena spent the next 3 days diving deep into the sensor data from the Thylos incident, working alongside Dr. Kevis while Zarak watched from the shadows of his command center. The Catherian admiral had begun eating again. Small meals, but it was progress. More importantly, his analytical mind was slowly re-engaging with the puzzle they had uncovered. The energy signatures don't match any known Void Wraith feeding patterns, Kevis announced, his holographic form flickering with excitement as he processed terabytes of data. In fact, they appear to be almost the inverse of what we would expect. Elena looked up from her portable medical scanner, which she had repurposed to analyze the exotic energy readings. Inverse how? Void Wraiths consume life energy by creating quantum tunnels that drain bioelectrical fields, Kevis explained, generating a simplified diagram. But these readings suggest the opposite occurred. Energy was being pumped into something, not extracted from it. Zarak's ears perked up with interest. For the first time in months, he was thinking like the brilliant strategist he had once been. Show me the exact locations where these energy spikes occurred. The holographic display of the Thylos system materialized above the command table. Red markers appeared at dozens of points across the 3 worlds, not randomly distributed but forming distinct geometric patterns. By the ancestors, Zarak whispered, his golden eyes widening. Those aren't feeding sites. They're anchor points, Elena frowned. Anchor points for what? Instead of answering directly, Zarak began pulling up classified files that made Elena's security clearance seem like a child's library card. Ancient Catherian texts appeared alongside sensor readings from the deepest space exploration missions. There are legends among my people, Zarak said, his voice taking on the reverent tone reserved for ancestral wisdom. Stories of the first darkness, a time before stars, when the universe was young and other forms of consciousness ruled the void between galaxies. You're talking about entities older than the Void Wraiths? Elena asked. Much older. The texts speak of the Primarchs, beings of pure thought and malevolent intent who were banished beyond the cosmic horizon eons ago. According to legend, they exist in a state between dimensions, unable to fully manifest in our reality without massive amounts of anchored energy. Kevis's hologram suddenly flared brighter. Admiral, I'm detecting similar energy signatures at 17 other locations throughout the galaxy. All of them sites where Void Wraith attacks occurred during your absence from various sectors over the past 5 years. The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. They haven't been feeding. They've been building a summoning array across the entire galaxy. A grid of anchor points, Zarak confirmed grimly. Each one precisely calibrated to weaken the barriers between dimensions. The Void Wraiths aren't the true threat, they're servants, preparing the way for something far worse. Elena's medical training kicked in, analyzing this new information like symptoms of a vast cosmic disease. How many anchor points would they need for something like this? Zarak was already running calculations, his tactical computer processing variables that made Elena's head spin, based on galactic mass distribution and dimensional resonance theory. Approximately 50 sites, minimum. And how many have they established so far? 18 confirmed. Possibly more in sectors beyond our monitoring range. Elena felt cold despite the fortress's heating systems. So we still have time. The summoning isn't complete. Time, yes, but not much. Zarak pulled up a predictive model that showed probable sites for future anchor points. At their current rate of expansion, they could complete the array within 6 months. Possibly less if they accelerate their operations. Then we need to warn the Galactic Council. With what proof? Zarak's ears flattened. Ancient legends and energy readings that could be interpreted a dozen different ways. The Council deals in political realities, not mythological threats. Elena stared at the holographic display, watching probability clouds shift across star charts like digital storm fronts. Somewhere out there, an ancient evil was methodically preparing to break into their reality, and the only person who could stop it was a depressed alien admiral who had convinced himself he was a failure. "Admiral," she said carefully, "you understand what this means, don't you? The attack on Thylos wasn't your fault. You were manipulated by entities that have been planning this for millennia. You couldn't have known." Zarek's massive form went very still. "Knowledge of their true nature does not excuse my blindness. I should have seen the pattern sooner. You should have had information that was deliberately hidden from you. There's a difference." "Is there?" Zarek's claws extended slightly. "I am the shield of the Rim, sworn to protect the galaxy from threats beyond mortal understanding. Whether I was deceived or simply incompetent, the result remains the same. Billions died while I chased phantoms." Elena realized she was approaching the crux of Zarek's psychological damage. His entire identity was built around being the ultimate protector, infallible and always prepared. The revelation that he had been outmaneuvered by cosmic entities older than his civilization didn't absolve him in his own mind. It made him feel even more inadequate. "Admiral, you said yourself that your legends speak of the first darkness. If your people knew about these entities, why weren't defensive measures put in place? Because the Primarchs were supposed to be permanently banished. The rituals that cast them out were performed by the combined will of a dozen elder races, including the Etherians who contacted you. None of those civilizations exist anymore except as shadows of their former glory. So you're facing a threat that defeated civilizations far more advanced than anything currently in the galaxy, using tactics and capabilities that no living being fully understands. And you think you should have somehow prevented their return?" Zarek was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a note of bitter humor. "When you phrase it that way, Doctor, it does sound rather unreasonable." "It is unreasonable. It's also typically Catherian. You assume personal responsibility for everything that happens in your sphere of influence, regardless of whether it was actually under your control." Elena moved closer to the command table, studying the projected anchor sites. "But here's what you're missing, Admiral. You're still alive. Your fleet is still intact. And now, for the first time, someone understands what the real threat is. The other races will never believe. They don't have to believe. They just have to follow orders from the most brilliant military mind in the galaxy." Elena met his golden eyes directly. "The question is, are you ready to stop hiding on this dead world and start fighting the war you were actually born for?" For the first time since her arrival, Zarek straightened to his full height. The movement was subtle, but Elena's medical training caught the shift in posture, the way his breathing deepened, the slight extension of his claws. The predator was waking up. The transformation began subtly. Elena first noticed it when Zarek started grooming himself properly, his matted fur returning to the lustrous black coat of a Catherian warrior in his prime. Then came the changes in posture, the unconscious straightening of his spine, the predatory grace returning to his movements. But the real shift happened when he began issuing orders. "Dr. Kevis, compile a comprehensive analysis of all suspected anchor sites," Zarek commanded, his voice carrying the authority that had once made entire fleets snap to attention. "Cross-reference with shipping routes, defensive installations, and civilian population centers. I want to know exactly where they'll strike next." "Already working on it, Admiral," Kevis replied, his holographic form practically vibrating with excitement. "I've identified 12 probable targets based on dimensional resonance patterns and galactic positioning." Elena watched from the medical station she had set up in the command center, monitoring Zarek's vital signs through discrete sensors. His stress hormones had normalized for the first time since her arrival, and his neural activity showed the complex patterns of a brilliant tactical mind operating at full capacity. "What about your fleet?" she asked. "You said you dismissed them." "I sent them to patrol secondary sectors under individual command authority." Zarek's claws danced across the holographic interface, pulling up fleet status reports. "Standard Catherian protocol. If a commander becomes compromised, the pack continues to function independently." The display showed positions of nearly 800 Catherian vessels scattered across the galactic rim. Each ship was a masterpiece of predatory engineering, crewed by warriors who had followed Zarek through countless battles against impossible odds. "They're going to be very surprised when you call them back," Helena observed. "They are going to be relieved," Zarek corrected. "Captain Thane has been sending increasingly urgent requests for new orders. The Void Wraith activity has tripled in the past month, and my captains know something is wrong." He opened a communication channel, and Elena felt a chill of anticipation as Zarek's image was transmitted across light years to his scattered fleet. On screens throughout Catherian space, crews would see their admiral, not the broken exile who had fled to Corvash Prime, but the legendary commander who had never lost a strategic engagement. All vessels. This is Admiral Zarek. Convergence Protocol 7 is now in effect. Rally coordinates are being transmitted to your navigation systems. Be advised, we face a threat unlike any in recorded history. The responses came flooding back within minutes. Battle-scarred captains and veteran warriors expressing joy, relief, and eagerness to rejoin their pack leader. Elena had read about Catherian pack dynamics, but seeing it in action was humbling. These warriors hadn't just followed Zarek out of duty, they had genuinely missed him. "Sir, this is Captain Thane aboard the Shadowfang," came one transmission. "The pack was incomplete without its alpha. What are your orders?" Zarek's expression softened slightly at the formal acknowledgement of his leadership status. "Prepare for extended operations, Captain. We're going hunting." As the fleet coordination continued, Elena found herself thinking about the journey that had brought them to this point. A broken admiral had been transformed back into a weapon of galactic defense, not through medication or therapy, but by understanding the true nature of his enemy. "Admiral," she said during a brief lull in communications, "there's something I need to ask. When this is over, when you've defeated the Primarchs and saved the galaxy, what happens then?" Zarek paused in his tactical planning. "I do not understand the question. You've spent months convinced you were a failure, punishing yourself for deaths that weren't your fault. But now you know the truth. How do you reconcile those two realities?" The Catherian was quiet for a long moment, his golden eyes distant. "On my world there is a saying, the hunter who returns from the longest darkness carries wisdom the pack needs. I have been in darkness, Doctor. Perhaps that was necessary for me to understand what we truly face. And the guilt? The sense of failure? Guilt is a luxury I cannot afford when the galaxy hangs in the balance." Zarek's claws traced patterns on the command table, but I will not forget the lessons learned in exile. Every tactical decision will be weighed against the cost in civilian lives. Every strategy will account for the possibility of deception. Elena nodded, recognizing the psychological healing that was taking place. Zarek wasn't simply returning to his old self. He was becoming something new, tempered by suffering and strengthened by understanding. "Fleet convergence will be complete in 18 hours, Kevis announced. "I'm also detecting increased Void Wraith activity near the Proxima sector. It appears they're accelerating their timeline. Then we accelerate ours." Zarek began issuing rapid-fire orders to his returning fleet. "Battle Group Alpha will establish a perimeter around the Vega system, high-probability target based on dimensional resonance. Battle Group Beta takes Centauri. They're likely to attempt a second anchor there to increase stability. Gamma Group." Elena listened to the complex deployment orders with growing admiration. This wasn't just military planning. This was three-dimensional chess played on a galactic scale, with each move designed to counter an enemy that operated beyond normal physical laws. "What about the Galactic Council?" she asked. "They need to know what's coming." "I will send Captain Torres back with a full intelligence briefing," Zarek replied. "But I do not expect immediate acceptance of our findings. Political entities move slowly, and we do not have time for bureaucratic deliberation." "So you're going to fight this war on your own authority?" Zarek's ears flattened slightly, not in depression this time, but in determination. "I am the Shield of the Rim. My authority comes from the ancient compact between the Catherian people and the civilizations we protect. If the Council chooses to join us, they will be welcome. If not," he gestured to the fleet positions appearing on his tactical display, "the pack will hunt regardless." Elena felt a surge of pride watching the transformation. The broken exile who had greeted her on the landing pad was gone, replaced by something harder and more dangerous than the original admiral. This was Zarek evolved, carrying the scars of failure but strengthened by the knowledge that some battles were worth fighting, even when victory seemed impossible. "Doctor," Zarek said, turning to face her directly, "I have one final request. The war we are about to fight will determine the fate of every living being in this galaxy. Will you stand with us?" Elena looked around the command center, at the displays showing impossible odds and ancient enemies, at the alien warriors preparing to face entities that existed before their species had learned to use fire. It was insane. It was hopeless. It was absolutely the right thing to do. "Admiral," she said with a grin, "I didn't come this far just to watch from the sidelines." 3 months later, Elena stood on the bridge of the Bloodfang as it cut through hyperspace toward what intelligence suggested would be the final anchor point. Around them, the largest fleet in Catherian history moved in perfect formation. Nearly 1,200 ships representing not just Zarek's original command, but volunteers from across the galactic rim who had rallied to his call. The past months had been a whirlwind of desperate battles and narrow victories. They had successfully disrupted 7 anchor points, each operation revealing new aspects of the Primarch's plan. The ancient entities were indeed trying to break through into normal space, but the process required more than just energy. It needed synchronized dimensional resonance across multiple points in the galaxy. Dr. Vasquez. "Incoming transmission from the Galactic Council," announced Lieutenant Commander Vex, the Bloodfang's communication officer. Elena accepted the transmission, and the familiar crystalline features of the Etherian ambassador materialized in the holographic display. Behind the ambassador, Elena could see other council members, representatives from dozens of species who had finally accepted the reality of the threat they faced. "Admiral Zarek." "Dr. Vasquez," the ambassador said formally, "the Council has voted to grant you emergency authority over all defensive operations in the Outer Rim. Additional fleets are being dispatched to support your mission." "With respect, Ambassador," Zarek replied from his command position. "Additional forces will not be needed for this engagement. The final anchor point must be destroyed using surgical precision, not overwhelming force." Elena had learned to read Catherian body language over the past months, and she could see the tension in Zarek's posture. Intelligence suggested that the Primarchs had established their last anchor point, not on some distant world, but in the ruins of the Thylos system itself, the site of the Admiral's greatest perceived failure. "Sir," reported the tactical officer, "dropping out of hyperspace in 30 seconds. The view screen shifted to show normal space as the fleet emerged from its hyperspace jump. Before them hung the 3 dead worlds of the Thylos system, but they were no longer the lifeless husks Elena remembered from the tactical displays. Each world pulsed with malevolent energy, connected by streams of dark force that bent space itself. "By the ancestors," Zarek whispered. "They're using the life energy they consumed here as a focusing lens." Elena felt sick as she realized the implications. The 2 billion people who had died in this system hadn't simply been killed. Their life force had been transformed into a tool for cosmic invasion. Every soul lost was now being used to tear holes in reality itself. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive dimensional distortions," Kevis announced, his holographic form flickering with interference. "The barriers between our reality and the Primarch realm are breaking down. Estimate 12 hours until full manifestation. Then we end this now." Zarek turned to his fleet commanders. "All vessels, implement Omega Protocol. Target the resonance nodes on each world simultaneously. We will have one chance at this." Elena watched the tactical display as Catherian ships moved into position around the 3 worlds. Each vessel carried specialized weapons designed specifically for this mission. Quantum torpedoes that could disrupt dimensional barriers, energy projectors calibrated to interfere with Primarch technology. "Dr. Vasquez," Zarek said quietly, "if this fails, I want you to know that bringing you to Corvash Prime was the most important decision I have ever made. You saved more than my life, you saved my purpose." "We're not dead yet, Admiral," Elena replied with more confidence than she felt. "Save the dramatic speeches for after we win." The attack began with surgical precision. Streams of coherent energy lanced out from the Catherian fleet, targeting the dimensional nodes that connected the 3 worlds. For a moment it seemed to be working. The dark energy flows fluctuated and began to destabilize. Then the void wraiths appeared. Not the scattered groups they had fought before, but thousands of the energy beings erupting from the space between dimensions. They moved with coordinated intelligence, forming attack formations that spoke of ancient military doctrine. "All ships, engage," Zarek commanded. "Protect the bombardment vessels." The battle that followed defied every tactical manual ever written. Catherian ships designed for physical combat found themselves fighting entities that existed partially outside normal space. Energy weapons that should have been useless against the void wraith suddenly proved effective when calibrated to the same frequencies as the disruption. Torpedoes. Elena found herself pressed into service as a battlefield coordinator, using her medical training to analyze the tactical situation like a complex surgical procedure. Admiral, the resonance nodes are strengthening each other. We need to hit all three simultaneously or they'll just regenerate. Impossible with current enemy interference, Zarek snarled, his claws extended as he orchestrated the fleet's movements. We need a distraction large enough to draw the void wraiths away from the primary targets. Elena looked at the tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities. Then she saw it, a pattern in the enemy movements that reminded her of something from her medical training. Admiral, the void wraiths are protecting the nodes like an immune system protecting vital organs. But immune systems can be overloaded. Explain. Give them a target they can't ignore, something that threatens their masters more than our fleet. Zarek's golden eyes focused on her with predatory intensity. What kind of target? Elena pointed to the largest of the three worlds, where dimensional distortions were creating visible tears in space itself. You, the one person in the galaxy who has disrupted their plans, who understands their tactics, who represents the greatest threat to their success. You want me to fly directly into their strongest defensive position? I want you to be bait. For a moment, Elena thought Zarek might refuse. Then his ears flattened and what she had learned was the Catherian equivalent of a predator's grin. All ships. This is Admiral Zarek. Implement Berserker Protocol. The Bloodfang will conduct a direct assault on the primary node. All other vessels. Begin synchronized bombardment the moment enemy forces converge on my position. Sir, protested Captain Thane over the communication system. That's suicide. That's tactics, Zarek corrected. The pack protects the galaxy. Sometimes the Alpha must lead from the front. The Bloodfang broke formation and accelerated toward the largest world at maximum velocity. As predicted, the Void Wraiths reacted instantly, abandoning their defensive positions to converge on what they perceived as the greatest threat. All batteries, target the dimensional nodes, Zarek commanded as enemy fire began to impact their shields. Dr. Vasquez, you might want to secure yourself. Elena strapped herself into a crash seat and watched as the bridge displays showed the final gambit playing out. Thousands of Void Wraiths were pursuing the Bloodfang, leaving the resonance nodes temporarily undefended. The rest of the Catherian fleet was already moving into position for the decisive strike. Torpedoes away, came the reports from across the fleet. Elena watched quantum torpedoes streak toward their targets on all three worlds. The weapons struck simultaneously, and for a moment space itself seemed to convulse. The dark energy flows connecting the worlds flickered and died. The dimensional tiers began to collapse. Then the Primarchs themselves began to emerge. Elena had expected monsters, but what came through the collapsing dimensional barriers was far worse. Entities of pure malevolent thought that made reality twist around them simply by existing. The view screen couldn't properly display them. Her brain kept trying to interpret impossible geometries that shouldn't exist in normal space. All ships retreat, Zarek commanded. The anchors are destroyed, but the manifestation process has already begun. Admiral, Elena called out, fighting against nausea as her mind tried to process what she was seeing. Look at the energy readings. They're not stabilizing. Without the anchor network, they can't maintain physical form in our reality. She was right. The Primarchs writhed in apparent agony as their forms began to dissolve. The laws of physics were reasserting themselves, pushing the ancient entities back into the dimensional void where they belonged. Within minutes, it was over. The three worlds of Thylos hung in space, dead but no longer pulsing with malevolent energy. The Void Wraiths had vanished along with their masters. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out as anchor points that had been prepared but not yet activated, collapsed without their dimensional support network. Fleet status report. Zarek requested quietly. 17 ships lost. 43 damaged, came the response. Approximately 4,000 casualties. Elena felt the weight of those numbers, but she also understood their context. 4,000 beings had died to save trillions. It was the kind of tactical exchange that Zarek had been making his entire career. Admiral, she said softly, how do you feel? Zarek considered the question seriously. I feel complete. The hunt is ended. The pack has succeeded. And for the first time in 6 months, I do not carry the weight of failure. He turned to look at Elena directly. You asked me once what would happen when this was over. I believe I understand now. I will return to my duties, but I will carry the memory of what it means to fail. It will make me a better protector,